Howdy everybody, welcome to the PepperTCG Elestrals channel. I've been playing this game for a little while, but I haven't ever entered a tournament before, so I decided to enter the MBT's Poison Nectar Monthly, and it was my first tournament. You guys know, if you came from my Yu-Gi-Oh channel, you know I like messing around with obscure decks and doing combos, and in my time playing this game, I've really enjoyed both Thunder and Solar, so I have really been liking Phosvocell whenever I play it. So I decided to enter with Phosvocell. I went 4-2, I got 10th place. There were a few other 4-2s that made top 8, so I just barely didn't make top 8. I'm pretty proud of myself for almost making top 8 in my first tournament with a pretty obscure deck. So let me just go ahead and show you the tech, because I think Phosvocell is a little bit of an underrated card, especially after the most recent ban list that came out yesterday. So, I mean, obviously, first off, we have the Phosvocell, Anacell, and the triple Larvacell. You don't need any more than this, because, like, I mean, this is a brick. This can kind of be a brick, unless you can stick a Thunder or a Solar to the field for a turn, and then you can ascend into it and use its effect to go up into the Phosvocell. Larvacell is really cool. It lets you Nexus a Thunder or a Solar, and if it receives a Solar, you can ascend it into the Anacell. The main way you're going to be triggering the effect is by nexusing a Solar off of either just like a dummy Solar Elestral, but mainly off of Apollo, because I am playing Apollo. But there's another way you can ascend to it as well. If you just have a Thunder on board, you can play it, or you can ascend over the Thunder using a Solar under it. So like an Astrabbit, you just ascend over the Astrabbit by putting a Solar under it, and it'll trigger the effect that way. Technically, you can Larvacell without a Nexus bank. Like if you just draw all Thunder cards and you stick an Astrabbit or an Elechick, you can still go up into the Phosvocell line if you just ascend over one of those. So it's pretty flexible in that regard, where there's multiple different ways to get the combo off, right? So it's pretty straightforward. Phosvocell is an absolute house. It just pops back row. It gets really big. If you do the full Larvacell combo where you Nexus a Solar, the Phosvocell will have 6 spirits. It'll have 4 after you detach to pop a back row. So if you play it into an empty back row, you're swinging for 6 damage just out of nowhere. Otherwise, you're popping a back row and then swinging for 4, which is still really good. The problem is, Anacell makes the package pretty expensive because you have to expend 2 Solar in order to ascend into the Phosvocell. But the Phosvocell makes up for it because the 2 Solar that you expended for the Anacell effect, the Phosvocell attaches to Thunder from the Underworld back to it. So technically you go even, just you don't go even in Solar. So that's the whole Phosvocell line there, and I can just go over maybe later. I play the 1 Arcolith. If the Phosvocell gets outed, Arcolith is just kind of the plan B, basically. It's like the surprise sneak attack Arcolith. And I think I really only summoned it in the tournament like twice, and it got Gorgonsed both times, so that's, I mean, you know, it happens. It happens. Also, since I only play 1, I'm not affected at all by the limited list from yesterday. And then just, we got all the Thunder shit, like Astrabbit, 3 Elechick, and a Quackle. Astrabbit is Astrabbit. Elechick searches our Divine Runes, which I play Apollo and Zeus, so it searches both of those. Now, of course, this is before the recent limited restriction, but thankfully, the other generic Divine Searcher in the game is Plucky, which is a Solar, So you can just take out 2 Elechick, put in 2 Plucky. I mean, it is a little bit worse because it doesn't threaten that 7 attacker with the Zeus. It's also a little bit better to play the Plucky because it's a solar, so if it sticks to the board, you can Nexus the solar off the Plucky for your Larvacell effect. And it also gives you more hits off of your Apollo if you decide to use Apollo's effect, which in this deck you really shouldn't unless you're really desperate for guys. You really shouldn't be using Apollo's effect. So number one thing is Elechick's coming out for the Pluckies because of the recent limited list. And then the Solars, 2 Lumaru, 2 Exaltus, and 2 Dratara. Lumaru's just a big body. It's a solar big body, so you can stick it. It's just a 5. I mean, it's a 5 in color scheme, so we play it. Exaltus is really cool. It's a Nexuser that can search for all kinds of stuff. It can search for Dratara, Astrabbit, and Quackle. So if you need a solar healer, it searches. If you need a thunder healer, it searches. And Astrabbit's just the best card in the game, so you can search that. I should also note that the reason I'm playing these Nexusers is because Phosvocell's effect to attach is a receive effect, if I can get it up here. Yeah, so when it receives 1 or more solar, you can enchant 2 from your underworld to it. So that's going to be the main way that you trigger Phosvocell's effect over the course of multiple turns. Because if you start the Phosvocell line off of an Apollo, you should put 2 solar under the Apollo. So you get 1 for the initial Nexus into the Phosvocell line, and then you have 1 left over for an Exaltus, a Dratara, or an Altar of Stars, which lets you, trigger the Phosvocell effect again, while also, resolving the Exaltus effect and Dratara effect to heal. Now you can just use your re-enchant for turn on the Phosvocell, but that doesn't, as long as your opponent is just playing guys in defense, that doesn't actually help you do damage and win the game. Whereas, Exaltus isn't big and Dratara's not big, but they could be enough to just help you poke for little bits of damage every turn while you're clearing the back row. Because the cool thing about Phosvocell is that if it sticks to the board for the rest of the game, any back row your opponent draws is dead. Because, you can pop the shield. If they draw a Tsunami or Altar, it forces it out during your main phase, and if they chain it to the Phosvocell effect, you can just switch the Phosvocell back to attack because you summoned it on the previous turn. PTA doesn't work. Gorgons can stall Phosvocell for a turn, but that doesn't really help the opponent. So that's the cool thing about Phosvocell, is that if it sticks, you don't have to worry about back row for the rest of the game, basically. Now I will say, after playing in the tournament, one thing I immediately realized is that I wanted to cut 1 Dratara and put in a 3rd Lumaru, which I had the 3rd Lumaru in my side, so I just did this constantly where I took out, after game 1 every round, I would take out Dratara and put in a 3rd Lumaru. So if you want to play this deck, this is the ratios I would recommend instead of what I played, because it didn't really feel all that great, I'm gonna be honest. The Drataras were kind of just dead a lot of the time, so you just want it as the search target when you need a healer. And then the runes, I got 2 Apollo and 1 Zeus. Like I said, you're not really using Apollo for its effect, you're just using it to put 2 solar spirits on the board and start nexusing. And then of course Zeus is also a nexus bank for thunder, but it actually helps you just beat over stuff, which can help you clear the back row and make way for your Phosvocell. Mandatory 3 Ambro, of course. Playing 2 Nectar. This was like a last minute addition, and it did end up feeling pretty good, because this is like a I don't know how to say it other than like this is a 2-card combo deck, right? This deck has a lot of 2-card combos in it where, you know, like Elechick, Search a Divine with Altar of Stars. I mean, Larvacell plus Apollo. I mean, there's just a lot of little intricate combos that you can find, and the Nectar helps you get there and just accrue card advantage. And because you have the main deck healers and the Phosvocell to regenerate Thunder, using that 2 doesn't feel so bad. 1 of Earthquake, of course. I don't play Laurels because I put too many spirits on board, and I think it would be dead most of the time. And then for all the back row, 3 Gorgons, 3 Altar, 3 Shield, 3 PTAs. Just all the good stuff, all the good cards. Another good thing about this deck is that you have plenty of back row space. Plenty of back row space. For the Spirit deck, that goes back in there. For the Spirit deck, I played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 Zaptor, I believe 8 Luminape, and then 2 Earth for the Earthquake. Now for when the Pluckies come in though, you probably want to lean more in favor of the Solar because you're playing a lot less Thunder cards. So maybe like a 9 and 9 ratio, just an even ratio, because you don't want to go too low on the Thunder because that's the main cards you're going to be sending for your counter runes. Because you want to bring those back with Arcolith and Phosvocell. So you want to be able to put enough in the Underworld while also still having enough in deck, you know, to actually play cards like Zeus and Astrabbit and things like that. Spirit deck felt really good with those ratios. I didn't really run into any problems with the Spirit math other than me misplaying a few times. And expending too much Solar and not being able to do the Phosvocell line. For the side deck, I played an extra Arcolith just as like another surprise card, which, I mean, after the ban list, you can't play that anymore, so that's got to come out. 3 Boombat for removal. Since we're playing a lot of Thunder, it just fits in. 2 Quackle to help against Heal Stall, I guess. I don't know if I have a good Heal Stall matchup, but it would help, I guess. 2 Thunderstorm, because this deck has a big problem with Gorgon's Gaze specifically. So if they set 1 back row and you have the Phosvocell line in hand, like thunderstorming that 1 back row just guarantees the Phosvocell lands, and then they have to have Earthquake or Laurels. But it's just good against those like deep draw back row heavy decks. And then I did play a few Solar cards as well. P-Gleam, Lustragon, and Lumaru. Lumaru, like I said, I put in every time, so that's just going in the main deck now. P-Gleam never came up. I don't really know what I put it in the deck for, but I never cited it in, so that's also probably coming out. And the Lustragon I put in as a secondary boss monster for very defensive decks where you don't use Arcolith. Like you take out the Arcolith from the main deck and you put in the Lustragon, because it's really good against the slow defensive decks where you can kind of just Nexus from your Apollo onto the Lustragon and, you know, back and forth over and over again over the course of a few turns and just whittle down your opponent. So if your opponent's playing a really slow, grindy defensive deck where they never put anything in attack for your Arcolith, I put in the Lustragon for those matchups, which I did play against 2 Water Nexus. So, I mean, Water Nexus kind of just spins its wheels for a while and doesn't really do anything until they can try to play a Chronodile. So I put in the Lustragon for the Water Nexus matchup just to like pop cards and keep up tempo against them. which I never summoned it because I never needed to, because Water Nexus isn't a good deck. And then 3 Cryoblast, 1 Flare Mine. These came in all the time. I cited these in not every match, but almost every match. Cards good. Oh, I will say, for the cards in the side deck that I didn't want to play, I want to try Divine Blessing. I mean, it just, like, if you land the Phosvocell and you have a Divine Blessing set, like, I don't know how they beat that card. I mean, it has 4 defense, which is not a lot, but it's still enough to prevent it from being eddied and mudlited. If it's stuck to the board, it means that they had no back row, and then you just pop their back row. So the only thing left is like Boom Bat, but if they're not playing Thunder, they might not be playing the Boom Bat. But everybody's playing Earthquake and Laurels. So this just beats Earthquake and Laurels that everybody's playing. So I'm going to test around with the Divine Blessing a bit in the side for like games 2 and 3. It's also good against like, I don't know, like double Cryoblast or like Zeus Cryoblast. I guess it also stops that. So it's like an anti-Thunder card, kind of. But yeah, I mean, that's the whole deck. Phosvocell is my new GOAT. I was swinging at people for like 7 or 8 damage all tournament. Just summon big guy, do a bunch of damage. Phosvocell is also really funny with Alter. One time my opponent, on the turn that I played the Phosvocell, they chained Tsunami to its effect, so it got switched to defense. And on the follow-up turn, they summoned a Galaxy to try to beat over the Phosvocell. So when they declared the attack, I just altered the Solar. I Nexused the Solar onto the Phosvocell from the Apollo, changed the Phosvocell to attack, and then Phosvocell's effect triggers to attach 2 more Thunder from Grave. So I think my Phosvocell had like 9 spirits on it. So their Galaxy just crashed into it and they took 8 damage. I mean, that was probably the highlight of the tournament for me, was altering onto the Phosvocell and dealing 8 damage on the opponent's turn. That was hilarious. But yeah, that's my Phosvocell deck profile for the Poison Nectar Monthly. Got 10th place. Barely missed out on Top Cut, but it was my first tournament, so I mean, it's only up from here. And you know, try out Phosvocell. He's fun. All right, bye.